How's this? How'd this get in here? My diary. Things I would like to do to my stepmom. Wow. I don't want to just write out my fantasies. Are you sure that you're sexually attracted to me, not just misplacing some kind of maternal need? No.
Mona's discovery of Riley's diary in her secret diary serves as a quietly transformative moment that opens a window into the emotional interiority of both characters and offers a rich exploration of intimacy, recognition, and self-discovery within the context of women's relationships, particularly for lesbian and queer audiences, and it does so without relying on spectacle or sensationalism, instead privileging the subtle, complex ways in which emotional bonds form and evolve. The scene begins with a mundane chore, laundry, that functions as a liminal space, a neutral and ordinary setting in which extraordinary emotional revelation can occur, reflecting how everyday life often contains the seeds of insight into human connection. Mona's curiosity about Riley's diary is immediately understandable, not as an act of invasion, but as an earnest desire to bridge a gap that she feels between herself and her friend, highlighting how intimacy is often preceded by vulnerability and tentative exploration. As Mona reads, she encounters the depth of Riley's admiration, longing, and reflective engagement with their friendship, and this serves as a mirror for her own emotional responses, allowing her to recognize both the affection she may have taken for granted and the ways in which she might respond with care, attentiveness, and reciprocity, establishing the foundation for mutual understanding. The diary, in this context, is not simply a plot device but a symbolic artifact of emotional labor. It represents Riley's careful, deliberate articulation of feelings that she may not have felt safe expressing aloud, an act that resonates strongly with queer women who often navigate social environments that scrutinize, marginalize, or police expressions of same-gender attraction and emotional attachment. The narrative, through the diary, foregrounds the interior life of women and validates the complexity of emotions that often go unrecognized in broader culture, emphasizing reflection, hesitation, and careful attention to relational ethics, as Riley leaves the diary intentionally for Mona to find, negotiating the delicate balance between disclosure and consent, a dynamic familiar to queer audiences who have had to strategize about visibility and emotional honesty in contexts that are not always safe or supportive. When Riley enters and finds Mona reading the diary, the interaction is charged not with sensationalism, but with the profound human need for acknowledgement and acceptance. Mona's initial shock and apology exemplify the negotiation of boundaries, demonstrating that emotional closeness requires attentiveness to mutual consent, receptivity, and the ethical treatment of vulnerability. And Riley's gentle reassurance transforms a potentially awkward moment into one of recognition and shared understanding. This exchange highlights the way lesbian and queer women often navigate internalized caution and the social scripts that dictate how closeness is performed, reflecting the broader pressures placed on women to moderate their visibility, expression, and effect in order to remain socially legible and emotionally safe. The conversation that follows between Mona and Riley allows for a sustained engagement with interiority as they discuss past experiences, shared memories, and unspoken aspirations. The scene foregrounds the process of mutual self-recognition, emphasizing that intimacy is as much about listening and observing as it is about expressing, and that ethical relational development depends on attunement to the other's interiority as well as one's own. The careful unfolding of emotional honesty here illustrates a central theme of the film, which is the cultivation of safe and authentic spaces where queer women can explore connection, desire, and affection in ways that are unmediated by heteronormative expectations or sensationalized cultural portrayals. By centering these conversations in a domestic, everyday context, the film situates emotional work and relational reflection as natural, necessary components of women's lives, highlighting how personal and relational development often occurs in private, nuanced moments that are rich with meaning but subtle in their expression. Moreover, the scene reflects on the ethical dimension of queer intimacy. Riley's diary is both an invitation and a gift, offering Mona insight into the depths of her affective life while also requiring Mona to engage responsibly with that information, mirroring real-world dynamics in which queer women must navigate the responsibilities of care, discretion, and respect when encountering each other's vulnerabilities. The narrative positions the diary as a conduit for intersubjective recognition, emphasizing that the act of sharing emotions is transformative, providing the potential for self-reflection, personal growth, and relational deepening, while also acknowledging the social contingencies that shape how such sharing is performed, received, and reciprocated. This is particularly resonant for lesbian audiences, for whom the stakes of visibility and emotional disclosure are often heightened by historical and contemporary erasure, surveillance, and marginalization. The scene models how trust, patience, and ethical engagement can foster intimacy without reproducing exploitative dynamics. Mona's internal response to Riley's diary further illustrates the ways in which emotional intimacy fosters self-recognition. As she reads, she becomes aware of her own affective needs, capacities for empathy, and the potential for reciprocating care in ways that are considerate, attuned, and mutually affirming, demonstrating that lesbian relationships, whether romantic, platonic, or somewhere between, thrive when participants actively engage in reflection and responsiveness, rather than simply reacting to external pressures or social expectations. The film's treatment of hesitation, boundary setting, and consent in this context also critiques persistent societal discomfort with women expressing affection toward each other. By making the emotional dimension central to the narrative, the film resists cultural tendencies to either erase or sensationalize women's same-gender intimacy, insisting instead on a nuanced, respectful, and thoughtful portrayal of relational development. In doing so, it challenges audiences to recognize that intimacy need not be sexualized to be meaningful, and that acts of attention, acknowledgement, and shared emotional labor are as valid and important as physical or erotic expressions in constructing deep connection. Expanding the analysis, the scene also engages with broader themes relevant to all women, including the negotiation of care and responsibility, the management of emotional labor, and the often complex interplay between personal needs and relational obligations. Mona and Riley's dialogue illustrates how women may experience guilt or hesitation when navigating their own emotional needs alongside those of friends or partners, reflecting cultural conditioning that frequently teaches women to prioritize the comfort and safety of others above their own truth. The narrative thus becomes a meditation on authenticity, illustrating that honest communication, reflection, and emotional attunement are necessary for sustaining relational health and personal growth. Furthermore, the scene models how emotional risk-taking, when undertaken with attention to consent and mutual respect, can yield profound rewards in terms of trust, closeness, and self-awareness, reinforcing the idea that queer women's experiences of love and friendship are deeply ethical as well as effective. By situating the discovery and discussion of the diary in the domestic and ordinary space of a home, the film underscores the intimacy of everyday life and the ways in which profound emotional revelation often occurs outside public spectacle, emphasizing that the authentic negotiation of feelings is as important as any dramatic event. This setting also underscores the contrast between the external pressures of societal norms and the internal possibilities of private emotional life, highlighting the ongoing tension queer women navigate between visibility and privacy, disclosure and discretion. The scene's focus on dialogue, reflection, and mutual acknowledgement resonates strongly with queer audiences who may have experienced similar processes of slowly understanding each other's feelings, negotiating consent, and establishing shared relational frameworks in contexts where expressions of same-gender affection are culturally surveilled or misunderstood. The nuanced portrayal of mutual recognition, where Mona comes to see Riley's intentions, feelings, and emotional depth, and Riley witnesses Mona's receptivity and consideration, serves as a paradigm for queer relational ethics, demonstrating that emotional intimacy is co-constructed and dependent upon attentiveness, empathy, and care, rather than mere affective desire or performative acts. Symbolically, the diary functions as a material manifestation of inner life, a bridge between interiority and relational reality, and a vehicle through which both characters confront their own insecurities, expectations, and capacities for emotional responsiveness, highlighting the ways in which queer women often need to negotiate self-expression in order to foster trust, visibility, and mutual understanding. The narrative also offers a subtle commentary on mentorship and modeling within queer women's relationships, as Riley's careful curation of her diary demonstrates a form of emotional pedagogy, teaching both herself and Mona how to navigate disclosure, honesty, and relational negotiation responsibly, suggesting that ethical engagement is an integral component of sustaining queer female bonds. In addition, the scene gestures toward the potential for chosen family dynamics, illustrating that emotional intimacy and care may develop outside of traditional frameworks and that queer women often construct meaningful, supportive networks through attention, honesty, and reflection. By engaging with these themes, the scene situates itself within broader conversations about visibility, emotional labor, and relational ethics in queer communities, foregrounding the significance of subtle, sustained engagement over sensationalized depiction, and emphasizing the slow, deliberate, and careful work of building connection. The ethical and emotional modeling present in the scene thus has wider cultural significance, providing audiences, particularly queer women, with examples of navigating affection, acknowledgement, and vulnerability in socially constrained environments, while also inviting reflection on the transformative potential of relational honesty and attentiveness in shaping personal and collective well-being. By centering emotional intimacy, ethical engagement, and relational growth, the scene exemplifies a mode of storytelling that treats lesbian and queer women's experiences with the seriousness, nuance, and respect they deserve, emphasizing that authentic connection requires time, care, reflection, and courage. The attention to hesitation, mutual respect, and consent models relational practices that extend beyond the characters themselves, offering viewers a framework for understanding how closeness, trust, and emotional recognition can be cultivated safely and meaningfully. The film's restrained, reflective approach ultimately challenges cultural tendencies to sensationalize or trivialize women's same-gender intimacy, insisting instead on the importance of emotional truth, ethical care, and the centrality of interior life in constructing meaningful relationships. In doing so, it celebrates the quiet resilience of women-centered relationships, highlighting that lesbian and queer women's experiences of love, admiration, longing, and recognition are complex, authentic, and deserving of thoughtful representation. Through Mona and Riley, audiences witness the layered, subtle, and profound work of becoming visible to oneself and to another in a society that frequently underestimates or misunderstands women's love for women, reinforcing the idea that relational visibility, ethical engagement, and sustained emotional attention are themselves acts of courage and significance. The scene's emphasis on everyday contexts, reflective dialogue, and ethical intimacy demonstrates that queer relational development is ongoing, co-constructed, and deeply embedded in the negotiation of self and other, emphasizing that understanding, care, and mutual recognition are central to sustaining meaningful bonds. By attending to these dynamics, the film provides a culturally rich, emotionally nuanced, and ethically rigorous exploration of women's interior lives and the possibilities for connection, offering a vision of queer relationality that is tender, realistic, and affirming. It demonstrates that emotional intimacy is a powerful and generative force, capable of reshaping understanding, fostering empathy, and creating spaces in which queer women can see themselves and each other clearly. And it asserts that such intimacy is not only valuable but essential for the formation of resilient, supportive, and authentic relational networks. In sum, her secret diary presents a careful, reflective, and ethically grounded depiction of emotional connection between women, emphasizing interiority, mutual recognition, and the quiet courage required to navigate relational vulnerability, offering audiences a model of queer relational ethics that prioritizes tenderness, reflection, and authentic engagement over spectacle, sensationalism, or reductive depictions, and demonstrating that the transformative power of emotional intimacy is central to understanding and celebrating the experiences of lesbian and queer women in ways that are both deeply resonant and socially instructive.